Before we jump into the video today, I just wanted to make something very clear. Casual is not an insult. While most TCGs were made to test players' skills and determine a winner, they're still made to be fun, even with no stakes on the line. The games that we're talking about today are all games that you absolutely can play competitively, and if you love playing these games competitively, that's awesome. I'm highlighting these games because I think these are some of the absolute best games in the market, even if you're not looking for that competitive experience. If you just want to grab a drink and some snacks with your friends, sit around, play a game, and have fun, all of these games offer one or more things that make them very special and especially good for playing and collecting the game in a casual way. So before you fire up those fingers, I just want you to keep in mind that the majority of TCG players in the market actually are casual players. And if the game is on this list, I'm actually praising it. I think these games that we're going over today are really in my opinion, top 5 casual games that you can pick up and play right now today. So with that out of the way, let's jump into it. What's up everyone, it's Dan with Main Deck, and I'm back with another top 5 video, this time the top 5 casual TCGs in the market right now in 2023. These are all games I think you can go pick up right away and start playing and have yourself a good time. Just like in our last video, I'm going to be going over some criteria that I use to come up with this list. As a reminder, this list is completely my opinion. Your list of 5 casual games might be totally different than mine. You might think, oh no, Dan, that game's great for playing competitively. That's awesome. Go toss it in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think. I am going to be reading every comment, and I love to read what you think and engage, as long as you're being cool to engage with. Now for the criteria I use, once again, I have 3 factors I'm looking at. Not every game hits all 3 factors or maxes out all of them, but the games that are higher up on the list use more of these or have a better focus or a more unique focus that make them, I think, good candidates for casual play. So your mileage may vary on how you feel about some of these things, but it's tricky. I just did my best to try and pick what I thought were the best ones. So the 3 criteria that I'm looking at today are thematics, gameplay, and accessibility. So let's jump into those a little bit deeper. Now, when we're talking about thematics, I think that's a very important aspect of casual play. If you're going to be playing a game, you have to enjoy it thematically. If you don't like playing shooting games, you shouldn't play first-person shooters. If you enjoy anime, you might want to play anime card games. I think it just kind of works out that way. So the things I look at when I'm evaluating a game's thematics are if it uses an IP, not its own IP, but some anime or some TV show or something. How well does it use it? How fun is it to be in that world? How immersive is a game's theme in general? How fun is the fantasy of getting into that game? How well does it come out on the table? What's the Ludo narrative like in a game? That is, how does the game tell a story as you play it? How can you engage with that and have an experience that you'll remember and enjoy? And simply, how fun is it to be in that game's world? I think all of these are important aspects to consider when you're considering if a casual TCG is right for you. Now, for gameplay, if I'm looking at a casual experience for a TCG, I kind of want to know how well is the game balanced so that if I play against any random person, we're not going to have a one-sided game. We're going to have a game that we can both enjoy. So I'm really looking at things like how delicate is the game balance? Is it easy to get blown out playing against a player who's playing a stronger, more competitive deck than yours? Is it a difficult game to play optimally? Some of the games we talked about in the competitive list are very difficult games to play optimally, but games that are easier to get into and easier to play at a higher level are simply more fun to play at the casual level because there's a smaller skill disparity between players. And I think an important aspect for casual play is, does the game support multiplayer? A lot of the time, casual play isn't just 2 people getting together, it's 3 or 4 or more, and everybody wants to be engaged in the game at once. So I think games that support multiplayer are naturally better games to play casually. And finally, accessibility. I didn't really consider accessibility for the competitive TCG list because if you're playing a game competitively, I'm going to assume you're just going to find the cards to play it. But when you're talking about playing a game casually, we do need to think about how expensive is it to play this game casually? How much are you going to have to invest to keep up with the game? Is the game releasing things too frequently? And how easy is it to simply find product that you like at all? If a game is too difficult to find, it's hard to include on the list because well, where are you going to get it? How are you going to play it? Or who are you going to find to play with? I think accessibility is also a highly important part of if a game is good to play casually. So those are the three factors. Those are the things I'm going to consider as I'm looking at each game on this list. Now let's jump in and talk about the top 5 casual TCGs. Now for my number 5 game on my list, I can already hear everybody grabbing their keyboards. Hang on, hear me out for just a second. My number 5 game to play casually is Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. Okay, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is obviously known for being an expensive TCG to play competitively and a complicated TCG to play at the highest level. Extremely convoluted combos, difficult stuff to play. I mean, I played Master Duel for a while last year, and that just completely destroyed my brain trying to keep up with it. However, I actually think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a wonderful game to play casually. I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game where a lot of the things that Konami does for the game really support people who just want to pick up cards and sling some fun archetypes and want to play them at honestly a cheap entry cost. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Does this thing where they will constantly push out new cards that are meta defining, and then after a little while ban the things that define the meta, and then that style of deck kind of goes out of style, but then there's some new ones that are also powerful, and they just kind of keep doing that. They will have cards that are very expensive for a long time until they super downshift the rarity and then reprint them into oblivion, and then they're no longer very expensive. They're pretty easy to get. All that stuff is really rough for playing competitively, but it's actually really great if you want to play the game casually, because what you can do is just pick up the archetypes from a year or two ago. They're still really fun, they're still really cool, and you can pick them up pretty cheap and jump into the game that way. I think it is a super fun game if you just want to pick some archetypes, build some decks, grab some structure decks, and just have a good time. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a cool universe. It's one where a lot of us as kids watched the show and we enjoyed that, and it's just fun to kind of get into that universe again and enjoy playing the game just for fun and revealing trap cards and doing all the fun stuff. But furthermore, I think Yu-Gi-Oh's done a couple of things recently that are really, really good for playing casually. My favorite thing is speed duels. Speed duels is a crazy cheap way to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! The decks literally cost at the top end $20. That's like the top end. The bottom end, I mean $5. Get a deck. They're 20 card decks. You may have a fusion or extra deck. I think it's called fusion deck in Speed Duel. You may have that as well. And they play like a half version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links mobile game where you have half your life total and you have 3 slots on the board. It gets you that feeling of Yu-Gi-Oh!, but it's super fast, it's super cheap, and it's just a really fun play experience. I think it's a wonderful side game to play, just like I think grabbing any random old archetypes for Yu-Gi-Oh! Could be. And also, as far as formats, they're supporting some, not really officially, but there are some formats being supported called Edison and GOAT that are going back to yesteryear Yu-Gi-Oh! GOAT format goes super far back, Edison format goes not quite as far back, but a little farther back, and they allow you to engage with a Yu-Gi-Oh! That you might remember from your childhood. And once again, they're pretty cheap to pick up cards for because all of those good cards have been just, reprinted into oblivion. So you can easily find those decks, get going, and start playing some really fun casual Yu-Gi-Oh! I think it might be a little trickier to find random people who want to play casual Yu-Gi-Oh! But you may have a speed duel tournament in your local area. You can go meet some people who are just playing for fun there. I think meta Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't really where to go for either competitive play because of the cost or for casual play because of the complexity, but I think a lot of the rest of the card pool of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is right there for you and really great, and I think you'd have a good time playing it casually if it's something that appealed to you. So that's my number 5 pick, Yu-Gi-Oh! My number 4 pick is Weiss Schwarz or Weiss Schwarz. I'm actually not sure what the ingrained WS players like to call it, which of those variants you prefer. Let me know in the comments down below if you think there's a preferred pronunciation for it. But the point is, Weiss Schwarz is a game that has, oh my god, every anime under the sun that you can imagine, plus a bunch of non-anime stuff like Adventure Time, and in Japanese sets, Star Wars and Marvel and Disney, and just, lots and lots of nonsense. If you like cool IPs, especially anime IPs or VTubers or stuff like that, Weiss Schwarz has cards for you. And I think the wonderful thing about Weiss Schwarz is that, as we're talking about thematics, it has every IP you can imagine, and you get to build a deck that uses cool pictures from your favorite show, your favorite anime, and you get to see almost all of them every game. The design of Weiss Schwarz is actually a game that has a sort of a built-in catch-up mechanism where you are going to take damage in your clock as your opponent's, beating into you, and that will allow you to level up potentially before your opponent and start playing stronger cards back on them. And you kind of do that back and forth usually until you both get to level 3, and it's a design where actually both players really get to engage in sort of the full gameplay experience every time. And I think that's really awesome. That's what makes it, I think, a really good casual game to play, because you're really going to get to see and play all your cool cards every single game. If it's a game you're getting into because you love a particular franchise that's in there, it's nice to know that when you sit down to play a game, you're not just going to get totally blown out every time. You're going to get to play the game. Not to mention, Weiss Schwarz is a collector's collector game. It is a game that has tons of really rare, really cool collectibles, but the cool thing is they're all like alternate arts of cards that are printed at lower rarity, so the cost to actually build a deck is not that high because players are ripping open these boxes trying to get the super chase cards, and then they're just trying to sell off the non-chase stuff to people who want to play with them so they can kind of recoup their costs on getting the expensive cards. If you want to chase cool collectibles for your favorite IP, you can do that. If you just want to play the game on a casual level, it's not that expensive to do, and you can kind of go in between. You can open a few boxes, try and find the chase stuff, and then just buy the singles for stuff you need, and I don't think it'll cost you all that much to do. So Weiss Schwarz is a great casual game. I think one that a lot of players should look at, because if you have an IP in there that you really like and you have an opponent to play with, I think you'll have a good time picking it up. I personally, from the very early release, I own the old Fairy Tail cards, one of my favorite anime, and I'm not getting rid of them. So that's Weiss Schwarz, my number 4 pick. My number 3 pick is Sorcery TCG. Now, this is one of 2 very new games on the list. Once again, I think the potential is there. It does need a little bit of time to kind of prove itself, but the great thing about a casual game is that you don't really need a lot of money going into a competitive circuit or anything. As long as you can get access to the cards, then you are able to play with them and enjoy it. And Sorcery has a beta print coming out extremely soon as I'm publishing this video right now, with an alpha print that actually got quite expensive on Kickstarter due to a lot of hype around it a little earlier this year. But Sorcery TCG is really a game that's meant to capture that old school feeling of Magic, and of all the games I've seen come and go that are trying to do that, Sorcery is the one that I think went full in on it the most. Sorcery is really like a casual game at heart with very slow release plans. The last I heard is 1 set per year, which, I mean, you should be able to keep up with that even on a casual basis. If you are into any TCGs at all, that should sound pretty super slow to you. And as you can see here, Sorcery TCG uses all sorts of cool old school Magic art style, old Western fantasy art that is, I mean, for the right audience, is exactly what you're looking for in a card game. Sorcery is played on a tactical grid. It's a tactical style TCG, a 4x5 grid in a typical game where you're going to be playing locations out and then moving your units around in those locations, casting spells on them. You got artifacts or relics, or they're called something like that, all over the place in there. And you are going to be moving things around and ultimately trying to defeat your opponent's avatar. In that way, Sorcery is a lot like a board game TCG, which I think actually lends it to being quite a good casual game to play. And as far as playing multiplayer, I don't think they've like officially put the multiplayer rules out, but they are definitely honing in on them, and I think they involve just expanding the board to be a little bit bigger, placing multiple people around the board, and getting just kind of a fun like free-for-all brawl throughout this tactical grid. I think it's a great multiplayer game for that purpose as well. A really good game if you're just looking for that like old school Magic feel, and you just want to hang out with your buddies, beer and pretzels, and sling some cardboard around. I think you'd have a really good time with Sorcery TCG. And because of this tactical system, I think the game is also very evocative. Again, we're talking about like this Ludo narrative, the story that gets told as you're playing the game. I think it's really strong in Sorcery TCG because every element you're moving around, you don't have to like kind of pretend, oh, these 2 things fought and this one died. You're going to be moving to spots on the board and launching attacks on things. You physically feel it, you see it. It's got a great table presence. I think all of those factors really make Sorcery TCG a wonderful entry into our top 5 casual TCGs. One you should look out for if it sounds interesting to you as soon as this beta print comes out. And then I think we've got some Arthurian Legends stuff coming up in the next set. So a lot to look out for, a lot to be excited about in Sorcery TCG, and that's what makes it our number 3 pick for a casual TCG to play. Our number 2 pick is probably the most exciting and popular TCG launch of the year, which is Disney Lorcana. Now, if you've seen some of my previous videos, you know I'm not like a huge fan of the Lorcana system myself, but I absolutely recognize the power that it has in getting people into it through the IP just engrossing people in that theme and then showing them a game that plays super, super well, even with large skill differences in players. The system of gaining lore rather than knocking people out actually makes the game a wonderful multiplayer experience as well, because there's no player elimination. I think a lot of the mechanics in Lorcana just really lend themselves to being easy to get into. The difference in skill isn't going to matter quite as much. There's certainly the possibility of just drawing the right cards, playing the right things, and you don't have too many options. It's not too hard to like figure out your turn. It's not like you look at 7 cards, you're like, I could do literally anything with these on turn 2. That's not something that really happens in Lorcana. A lot like Magic the Gathering, it sort of guides you. Play a resource, okay, play something that costs 2. Play a resource, okay, play something that costs 3. Systems like that are exceptional for casual games because they sort of hold your hand just enough to kind of get you through those early turns, and the game opens up naturally as the gameplay progresses. I think that's wonderful, and the way Lorcana does it is super easy for people to get into and removes the sort of the mana screw issue that a lot of people dislike from certain other popular games, which we may be talking about shortly. And of course, with that Disney IP, Lorcana is a game that's going to appeal to all ages. It's a game you can get your kids into, you can play with the family, brother, sister, mom, dad, all could play it together. It's hard to not rank Disney Lorcana highly because it really is a wonderful, wonderful casual experience, and something you should look at if you have especially a wide age range that you want to get into playing TCGs just for fun. Don't need to get too competitive. While there will be competitive circuit, I think Lorcana is best at the casual table, and that's what makes it my number 2 pick for a casual TCG to play. Now, here is my number 1 pick for a casual TCG to play, and I know I'm going to get people who disagree with me on this. That's okay. It's my list, and in my opinion, the best casual TCG to play is Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering is, of course, the granddaddy of TCGs, the one where you are going to always be able to find an opponent for it, especially if you're looking for Magic's number 1 format, the casual format, Commander. Commander is a ubiquitous format for Magic the Gathering. Basically, everybody's got a Commander deck. Even if you don't actively play competitive Magic, I think at least half the TCG players you talk to who don't play Magic say, oh, well, you know, I have a Commander deck. Like, of course I have a Commander deck. It's something that's very, very common because Commander is simply one of the most enjoyable, most fun, casual formats for a TCG ever made. It's fun to get into. It's fun to play. The games go long. It's usually long enough where you're able to do the things your deck wants to do. The game is a multiplayer game, so if you ever get kind of screwed out of a game, you usually get targeted less. It gives you time to get back into the game. Typically speaking, more people get fun experiences out of playing Commander than they do out of playing head-to-head because of all those reasons. Mana screw is a little less of an issue. Mana flood is a little less of an issue. You get to do things with your deck. Your deck gets to do its fun combos. You get to do crazy stuff in Commander because of how late the game goes and the stuff that's just really fun to do. It's all possible on the Commander table. And while I think you can certainly play other formats casually of Magic, I think when I'm talking about casual Magic, I'm really talking about Commander. Now, I do really like those other formats. Formats like Two-Headed Giant are staples at pre-releases in my area where I always love to go attend, and we play fairly competitively, but it also feels somewhat casual to me. And I've engaged in some really, really wild formats at bigger conventions. At Gen Con this last year, I played in the Unknown tournament that Gavin Verhey put on. That was a wild time playing with playtest cards and a weird assortment of booster packs to build a Commander head-to-head deck with. It was just nuts, and it definitely reminded me of just how much fun it can be to jump in and play casual games of Magic with random people I don't know. Now, I think the elephant in the room with Magic is Wizards of the Coast's relentless release schedule, but that's where I think playing casually really shines, because when you're playing Magic the Gathering casually, you can easily ignore products you don't care about and just aim for the ones you like. If you like Doctor Who, they just released Magic Commander decks for that. If you like Fallout, they just started teasing Magic Commander decks for that. They have the 40k Commander decks, they have the Lord of the Rings set. There's actually tons of fun IPs. Plus, if you like the actual Magic lore, pick your favorite set, jump in, buy singles, buy booster packs, whatever you want. Buy a secret lair if you think it's cool. But the key is, when you're playing casually, you don't have to buy absolutely everything, and that's where I think their argument of skip the things you don't want to buy actually has a little bit of merit. So My number one pick is Magic the Gathering because it's really hard to not pick it. I think it's an extremely fun game to play Commander casually. It's got other fun formats to play. And with their huge selection of products now, it's really easy to find products that you really enjoy and easy to find opponents to play with, of course, because it's Magic. So with that said, that is my top 5 games to play casually. I would love to know now down below what you think the top 5 casual TCGs are. And if you missed it, check out my top 5 competitive TCGs video as well. Maybe a game you thought deserved a little credit is actually over in that list. You should go check it out. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you in the next one.